Welcome to the PM Talk Show. This is Pat Marsh, your host. We're out here with a beautiful day on beautiful Miller Lake in Hammond. We are getting ready to get into another election season, and we brought someone on who will be very helpful with giving you news about what needs to be done, what's going on in the Hammond area in this arena. And I'm speaking of none other than Mrs. Jean Voorhees of Hammond, who's president of the Tanger Democrats. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Pat. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is, and thank you for being my guest. We have a lot going on in Tangipahoa Parish, so a lot. So do you want to share your concepts of what's going on with us?
Well, change is going on.
Okay.
Change is going on everywhere, and I think really that has a lot to do with the energy in this election.
Right.
I think many people are very upset and a little bit frightened about all the changes, and that kind of energy, when you have an electorate that goes out to vote, you know, nobody tells us what our government's going to be. We decide what our government's going to be, and we are upset. We are upset in many different ways, and on the same issue, people can be upset in both directions, some for and some against. But there's just a general feeling of the turning of the ground in our nation and also in our community.
Right, so people are ready for change, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, they're ready for change and they're afraid of change.
Okay.
I really think that a lot of the energy in this whole campaign is the fact that there have been so many changes. You know, we see a lot of changes that technology is bringing in. There's a change in the whole social order. Back 20 years ago, pretty much the white men ran the show. That's where the power base was, and the men told the women what to do, and the white people told the black people what to do, and the rich people told the poor people what to do, and it was a pretty rigid system. And if you were on the top of the heap, that was pretty comfortable, and that was the good old days. But it was not so much the good old days for the people who were on the bottom end of the stick.
Right.
And as a result, you know, the people who were in favored positions feel very, very uncomfortable and threatened by women getting rights, by the African Americans getting rights, by the gay, lesbian community getting rights. It's getting so you just can't kick anybody around anymore.
Right, right.
And that's driving a lot of the anxiety.
Right. How do you feel you have a younger generation of people, voters, that's coming aboard now, and I really believe they are as afraid, if not more, than we baby boomers were and are right now. How do you deal with that? What are your recommendations for driving that change that needs to be done?
Well, I can understand young people being concerned. You know, when I was in my 20s, about 5,000 years ago, the world, you could see continuity, and I could project what the world might look like when I was 30 and when I was 40, and I assumed that things would not change dramatically. Well, a 20-year-old today has seen so much change in their life that it's like being in the middle of a popcorn machine. You know, things are just going everywhere. And a lot of them are concerned about getting jobs. They're concerned about the stability of our world. They're very idealistic, as is healthy, and thank goodness for it.
Right.
Young people have a deep sense of justice. They have a deep gut sense of what's fair and what's not fair. And it's when they're at home with their family, they have some sense that they have a voice, and that, you know, mom and dad aren't going to all of a sudden decide this child gets everything and you don't get any supper. That there's some basic sense of fairness. And as they get into college age and you know, going into the workforce, they find out the world is not fair. And it justifiably makes them angry.
Right.
And that's the best thing we have going for us.
Okay, how, if you were, which you are, a parent, from the standpoint of your own children, what would you tell them now and then from the standpoint of maybe you have a friend who have children who are caught in this maze of whatever we're going through now. What would your recommendations be, first to your children and then to someone else's child?
Well, if I had a child who was a young adult, 20, 30 something, I would advise them to pay attention to what's going on.
Right.
The world, the way it's set up right now with electronics, young people live in a bubble, an electronic bubble, and it's so easy to say, I'm a kid, that's not my problem. I've got my computer, I've got my laptop, I've got my smartphone, I can go to school, and that's just the adult's world. Well, maybe it's not. That's
Right.
your world.
Right.
And as early as you can possibly start getting children aware, to make them look up and look around them and see what's going on in the real world. Because that bubble of childhood doesn't last. And as long as, right up to high school, I remember the big jolt when I left high school. In high school, you're in a building with a couple hundred people, you see the same people all the time, you go from this class, you got your buds, you sit at lunch with your buds, and you've got a very small, contained universe. And then you graduate from high school, and whether you go to college or get a job, all of a sudden, everybody's gone.
Right.
And you don't have that community and that predictability about your day. That bubble, children need to be taught to go up to the edge of the bubble and look through it and look at the world out there, because it's not real.
Right.
And we try to protect our children and say, well, mom and dad will take care of that. Well, mom and dad can't take care of that all your life.
Right.
So I would suggest reality as
Right.
much as you feel that they can
Right.
absorb.
And stressing education, how would you do that using the same scenario? How would you stress education, kids getting educated?
Well, that's a part of the reality.
Right.
They need to know that things will not be given to you. Just because you're a good kid and mom and dad have always loved you, when you get out there, you have to earn it. You have to, and that means you have to get a job. Playing video games is not a job.
Right.
You need to work, and I would start as young as possible with a work ethic. If it's delivering newspapers or mowing grass or whatever, to make sure they understand that they have to make their way. And education will open doors for them.
Right.
That just getting by and getting your high school degree isn't going to get you very far.
No.
And trying to live on, they don't raise the minimum wage, trying to live on $7.25 an hour and raise a family, forget it.
It's not going to happen, no. No.
And it's so easy to look around you and see, well, everybody has cars, everybody has a house, everybody has everything they want, TV and cable. Well, they're paying for that.
Right.
And everybody doesn't have those things. And
Right.
if you don't get an education, your chances of getting a decent job where you can afford even the minimal nice things in life is very
Right.
hard.
Right. When you look at, people talk a lot about, and I know when I was in college, we studied a lot about globalization. How will that play into what we're speaking of now with the child seeing the importance of getting an education and playing into politics if you don't?
That's one of the main ways in which the world is changing, and that's a conversation that we're having nationally right now. Basically, the Republican Party, the candidates that are running for the Republican nomination are trying to hold back that tsunami of change.
Right.
And the Democratic Party, we don't necessarily like all of it, but we acknowledge the fact that it is a global world. On my little smartphone, I can go on there and I can talk to somebody in Ecuador and find out what's going on with the earthquake down there.
Exactly.
I can talk to my sister-in-law's family in Germany. The whole world is no longer bounded by those national lines. And so the job market's going to change. The flux of our society right now is just incredible. But part of it has to do with the breaking down of those national boundaries. And
do you feel that's a good thing, or is that not so good of a thing to have happening now?
it's a mixed bag,
Okay.
but it's one of those things like when a train is coming at you at 60 miles an hour, it is.
Right.
deal with it.
Right. You either move or
Yeah.
you get hit.
I don't think that the Republicans, even if they do everything in their power, are going to be able to stop the globalization.
No.
It's going on.
Right.
I have two international students staying with
Okay.
me for a few days right now, and they were saying they were in Turkey to get their visas to come to Southeastern to be students.
Okay.
And in Turkey, they had McDonald's, they had Popeye's chicken in Turkey.
Okay.
And we had Popeye's chicken. They said, you know, it tastes the same as the recipe in Turkey. It's a global world.
Right. And you
It's
either
just
get
the
rid of for it or you get stormed by it.
Yes, and it's like being against that is like being against the rain.
Right.
It is, you can't stop it. You need to
Yeah.
find a way to swim with it, to deal with it, and make it work for you.
Right. In closing, what would you said a lot this morning, but from a motherly perspective, from a perspective of a community person, what would you tell the kids here today, say Tangipahoa Parish? What would you tell them today?
I would tell them that they need to get involved. That if you do not get involved, if you sit back and passively let the world do what it's going to do, you will feel powerless. It will sap your energy and your creativity. The only way I deal with all these changes is to get out there and do what I can do,
Right.
to do everything I can to bring about the changes I want to see.
Right.
That's what the young people are doing with the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Right.
They're out there, they're holding up their signs, they're writing letters, they're getting involved to try and bring about the changes they want to see. And I would suggest to them that you can either sit there and feel powerless, or you can decide out of all the things that can possibly be done, which are the things that you can do,
Right.
and do them.
Right.
Get involved, find your voice, and be a part of the problem, of the solution,
Right.
instead of just being run over by the problem.
Right. Right. Well, Mrs. Voorhees, we want to thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
We always enjoy you coming and your input for whatever the occasion is at the time. And right now, you are yet the president of the Tangi Democrats, and I think you're doing an outstanding job. So thank you for that. We want to continue to invite you to come and to be positive and to make the recommendations that you've done this morning. This is Pat Marsh, your host for the PM Talk Show. We're going for a break, and we'll be right back.
You probably already know that if you buy alcohol for me or my friends, it's illegal. But what you might not realize is that if you host a party where alcohol is provided for anyone under the age of 21, you could get sued, go to jail, or worse. Somebody could get hurt or even die. Is that a risk you're willing to take? So if you care about teens, don't provide the means.
Welcome back to the PM Talk Show. This is Pat Marsh, your host, and we have with us another very special guest, Mrs. Mary Porosco, who is a radio personality for the Tangipahoa Parish and surrounding areas, and she's very knowledgeable on a lot of things. And since we're in the political season right now, we wanted to invite her on to give her views of what's going on, especially to the people of Louisiana, because we have a lot of serious problems. How are you doing this morning?
I'm so good. It's so nice to be here in Hammond, America, on this lovely Miller Lake next to one of the loveliest ladies in Tangipahoa Parish.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted you to come on today because you hear so much going on and there's so much confusion. My first guest, Mrs. Voorhees, talked about the fear that's out there because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. So we want the expert to come on and tell us her take on what we see happening, what we may need to do as a group of peoples that's going to help us be a better place to live.
Well, I can't claim to be an expert. I can claim to be experienced at my age. So I know, having lived through several wars and lots of presidents, I go back to Franklin Roosevelt, who was president when I was born. And he said so many times, we have nothing to fear. but fear itself.
Right.
Do not let yourself be overcome by fear. I've stopped watching a lot of the news. I get my news online or on Channel 17 because they're just fear-mongering. There's no real journalism out there.
Right.
The Tangible Parish Council just recognized Vic Couvion for his years of reporting. Now that's a journalist.
Right.
Vic Couvion is a journalist.
Very much so.
I don't know too many journalists these days. I mean, there's a couple at the Daily Star. I'm sure there's a few at the Advocate.
Right.
But most of the news today is based on selling product. The president of CBS said Donald Trump may not be good for the country, but he's certainly good for CBS.
Right.
Because he's selling. And so you don't watch that stuff that is showing you just fear. I don't think that fear can be helpful in any way because it paralyzes us and we feel we have no voice. And for me, the strongest voice of all here in the United States of America is the voice of the vote.
Exactly.
And you know how people struggled to get the vote.
Exactly.
My mother was 8 years old when women finally got the right to vote. Black people for many years did not have the right to vote.
Right.
There are still people whose vote is being suppressed.
Right.
They're closing voting districts. They're making it very difficult to register to vote. You have to fight that because this is your voice.
Right.
This is the power that you have, and that's the power to vote. Jean and I and some of the other members of the Unitarian Church, the Hammond Unitarian Church, and the Democrats, Tangi Democrats, have been going to the different high schools and helping seniors register to vote.
Okay, great.
And this is a marvelous experience because here you have these exuberant, wonderful children who are coming out of high school. They're ready to change the world.
Right.
And we hand them this card and say, here's how you do it. You register to vote and let people know where you stand and what you support. And we come away from those experiences feeling totally rejuvenated and so hopeful that young people today are going to really make a difference.
Right.
Jean talked about the social media, but you know, these young people are connected all over the world now, and they know that globalization is not just happening, it's necessary. We can't have any more, in this country, we can't have 1% of the people with all the wealth. And we can't have just the United States with all the wealth in the rest of the world while other people are going without food and basic necessities.
Right.
We have to be fair about this.
Right.
And we have to be concerned about children in all countries, not just our own children, but children in Africa and children in France and children in Nigeria, everywhere.
Right.
We have to be concerned about children. So what we're doing, again, is this voter registration drive. And to register to vote, first of all, you have to be a U.S. citizen.
Right.
You can register to vote if you're 16 when you get your driver's license.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that, but when you're 16 and you go to get your driver's license, you can also register to vote. Now, you can't vote till you're 18, but you're registered. Otherwise, you have to be 17 years old, and most of our high school seniors are 17 years old. You have to live in Tangible Parish and in the state of Louisiana. And you have to not have been convicted of a felony. There's some work on that. Some people were convicted of felonies at a very young age. They've never been able to vote. Some people are trying to work on that. But right now, if you've been convicted of a felony, you can't vote. And you have to be mentally competent and not interdicted. That's all. You don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to be pretty. You don't have to be any particular color or size. You don't have to be thin. You can register to vote.
Right.
You need a picture ID when you go to vote. And that picture ID is often your driver's license because it has your signature on it. Now, a lot of youngsters in particular will want to bring their high school card or their college card, but if it doesn't have your signature, you can't use that. So you have to have a driver's license or another picture ID with your signature on it.
Well, if they're not driving yet, they can get a state ID.
They can, and
That
I
has
know
a
that
picture on
sometimes
it.
that costs money, but I understand that if you take your little voter registration card with you, you can get one for free because you're
Okay.
going to be using it for voter identification.
Okay.
So no one should be refused any method of identification due to money. There's a way to do this, and you have to kind of stand up for yourself sometimes, but you and I know how to do that.
Yeah.
And we'll teach you how if you need
Right.
help. You can get that free Louisiana ID at the motor vehicles office.
Okay.
The next election is going to be so important. The
Yes.
presidential election on November
Exactly.
8th. Now they're going to close the books 30 days ahead of time. So you have to be registered to vote before October 8th.
Okay.
If you want to vote for our next president of
Yeah.
the United States.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. We were talking earlier that the Queen is 90 years old now, and she's kind of a stable person in the UK. But in our country, we have a democratic process, and it works very, very smoothly. We go and we vote for the person we want to be president, and in January, they take office. There's no guns involved, there's no soldiers involved, they don't shut down anything. One person moves out, and the next person moves in, and our government continues. It's beautifully run. But you want to have a choice in who will be that next president. And there are quite a few candidates out there with very, very different platforms. Don't believe everything you hear or see. Go on their web pages, see what their platforms are, see what you agree with, and choose that person that you think is the best for the country.
Right, right. And that's everything that you said, Ms. Porosco, is so very important. I've always, I guess when I talk to people, or I know when I talk to people and I ask the question, are you a registered voter? Especially if something is happening and you have not registered to vote, but you want to complain about it. But as you say, your voice is your complaint.
That's
so
right.
exercise your, if you want to see change, if you want to evoke change on a lot of stuff, and we have problems worldwide. I mean, we're just in a time now. But if we're waiting for our young people to do it, then we have to do like you're doing, like your Jean is doing, like I'm doing. Encourage them. Thank you for going into the schools and getting the kids to register to vote, because they are our legacy. People my age and your age and people older than the two of us, those kids will carry.
older than the two of us?
I hope. I really hope so. But when you look at the fact that these people are the ones who would carry on society, I would want to think that at least, at the very least, you get out and vote your choice,
Yes.
because that's what it's about.
And if you don't do that, you don't have the right to complain.
No, you don't.
You've given that away.
Right, you have.
But
You have.
another thing I think young people really would benefit from is studying history. A lot of them don't realize how hard a fight we had to gain the right to vote.
Right.
Not just when the country was founded, but throughout history.
Right.
That right to vote is precious.
It is.
Don't let anyone take that right away
Right,
from you. That's the fundamental right of our democracy,
Right.
and it is so important. It's a treasure that no one can take from you. You only give up yourself. So make sure that you have that right to vote. We've been here long enough where we've seen so many of these rights we fought for going downhill again,
Right.
being taken away again. A lot of the rights we thought we had forever, we don't.
We don't.
And they're sliding away, and so we have to fight that fight all over again. And if you read history, you see it's cyclical. It goes up and it goes down like a roller coaster.
Right.
And if you know what has happened in the past, you know how to behave in the future. If you don't know history, you're condemned to repeat it.
We are, and that is just as true as we're sitting here right now. Well, we want to thank you for coming and sharing with us,
Oh, my great
especially
pleasure.
letting everybody know what they have to do to vote, and especially the part if you don't have money to pay for your ID, if you don't have a license, then there's you can go to the Department of Motor Vehicles in your area, with your
Your voter
your
registration
voter
card.
registration
And if
card,
you
and they'll
lost
give
it, call the voter registrar's office, or you can go online
Right.
and print out another
Right.
one.
So there's absolutely no reason that you cannot register to vote.
That's
Just
right.
get out and do it. It is important now.
And then you can say, I'm a voter.
Right, right. That's a great, beautiful thing to say. I remember when I said it the first time. I remember it to this day, and I take advantage of that.
That's right.
Well, we want to thank you again for coming. We will be bringing you back again when it gets closer to the election,
I
and
look
just
forward to
remind the
that.
people about what's going on. This is Pat Marshall, host, and we want to thank you for continuing to join us. Please excuse what I'm going through right now, but it's getting better. Thank God, it's getting better. We want to invite you to continue to remember that knowledge is powerful, knowledge does matter. Thank you for joining us today. God bless.